Whether an ongoing phenomenon, a one-time mass disappearance, or other strange event, people have mysteriously disappeared in groups over thousands of years and under all kinds of circumstances. And these cases have fueled mysteries, conspiracy theories, and even pop culture, but they still remain unresolved. What's more, the search for answers continues even today. In the age of the internet and eyes everywhere, will the mystery of such disappearances ever be solved? Will the lost souls ever find closure? Let's take a look. Starting off at number 10 is the mysterious case of the village at Lake Anjikuni in Canada's northern Nunavut region. In remote northern Canada, Anjikuni Lake is the site of caribou, Arctic fish, and the legendary disappearance of a whole Inuit village. According to a story first published in the Danville Bee in 1930, fur trapper Joe LaBelle returns to a remote Inuit village of about 25 people he has visited previously, only to discover that everyone is missing. The tents and villagers' belongings are still there, but there's no sign of the inhabitants. According to this news account, LaBelle reports, the whole thing looks as if it has been left that way by people who expect to come back. But they haven't come back. He also notices signs that ancestral graves have been disturbed. While there are dog skeletons in the village, he can find no sign of human corpses. LaBelle reports his findings to the Northwest Mounted Police. The police find that the Inuit have been missing for 8 weeks before LaBelle's visit, but they cannot locate them or uncover what has happened. Adding to the mystery, officers report seeing blue, unnatural pulsing lights over Lake Anjikuni. Explanations for the missing 25 to 1,000 villagers have developed through UFO websites and a 1983 Dean Koontz horror novel. But there are some reasons to doubt this story, which entered the popular imagination when it appeared in Frank Edwards' 1959 book, Stranger Than Science. When the Royal Canadian Mounted Police investigated the case in 1931, they determined there is no evidence to support such a story, noting that a village of that size wouldn't feasibly exist in such a remote location. He also adds that local officers, trappers, and missionaries have reported nothing out of the ordinary. While this mystery was never solved and continues to garner attention through UFO conspiracy websites, the next case on the list can bamboozle your mind completely. When George and Jenny Sauter go to bed on Christmas Eve in 1945, 9 of their 10 children are at home. Their 10th is serving in the military. But a fire breaks out, and by the next morning, the Sauter house has been burnt to the ground. George, Jenny, and 4 of the children make it out. However, the other 5 children, who range in age from 5 to 14, are never seen again. Initially, everyone, including the surviving members of the Sauter family, assumes the children must have perished in the fire despite their father's attempts to rescue them. And because it is Christmas Day, the fire marshal postpones a thorough inspection of the site, which is basically a basement full of ashes at that point. A few days later, George Sauter bulldozes several feet of dirt over the remains of his home, planting flowers there in memory of the family's lost children. As time goes on, more details emerge that cast doubt on whether the 5 missing Sauter children have actually died in the fire. The family remembers some odd events around that time, which seem odd upon investigation. Jenny is awakened earlier in the night by a noise that sounds like something hitting the roof. The family receives what they think is an odd prank phone call just after midnight on the night of the fire. Additionally, a ladder has been moved from its storage area near the house to more than 75 feet away, hindering George's attempts to reach his children upstairs bedrooms to rescue them. In another strange twist, the bones of the missing children are never recovered, despite the fact that the fire does not appear to have burned long enough or hot enough to destroy human bones. The Solders never stop looking for their missing children. They offer a reward for information and erect a billboard near their house. They hire private detectives to follow up on reports of sightings, including a photo of a young man bearing a striking resemblance to one of the missing children, which is mailed to the Solders. Some suggest that the children could have been kidnapped in retaliation for negative remarks George Solder, an Italian immigrant, has made about Mussolini. There are even suggestions that the mafia could have been involved. Despite the many theories that emerge, no conclusive evidence of what ultimately happens to the 5 Solder children has ever been found. Freaky, isn't it? 5 kids suddenly disappear from the comforts of their home, never to be found. But if you think this was unfortunate, wait till you hear about thousands of children that went missing from an entire country in our next case. Number 8. Following Israel's founding in 1948, the state struggled to quickly absorb a rush of new immigrants. More than 50,000 Yemenite and other Mizrahi Jewish immigrants from the Middle East and Africa moved to the new state in its early years and settled in chaotic transit camps, temporary tent cities where new immigrants were housed due to a housing shortage. In these camps, babies and toddlers are often taken from their parents to be cared for in hospitals or nurseries, which ostensibly offer better living conditions. Unfortunately, some of these babies, estimates range from 650 to more than 4,000, are never returned to their parents. Some parents are told that their babies have died, though most are not shown a body or a grave, and many grieving parents aren't given death certificates. Recent advances in DNA testing have proved that at least some of these supposedly deceased Yemenite babies never died at all, but rather were placed for adoption with childless Ashkenazi or Jews of European descent families. In 2016, one Israeli cabinet official who was part of a panel investigating the disappearances gives credence to activists' claims that the children were systematically stolen and placed for adoption, when he admits that hundreds of children are taken from their families, saying, "They take the children and give them away. I don't know where." Thousands of missing children. Is it a case of high infant mortality at the time, as one professor suggested, or a much sinister truth? The answer is still up in the air. But what happened to a fleet of fighter planes that went missing, followed by the rescue team as well? Find out in our next case. Flight 19 doesn't consist of a single plane, but rather a group of 5 planes, U.S. Navy TPM Avenger bombers, which take off from Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station for a training mission between the Bahamas and Florida on the afternoon of December 5, 1945. The planes and the 14 experienced airmen on them never returned to shore. The pilots of the group of planes, which will be known as the Lost Patrol, can be heard conversing with one another and sound disoriented by the fact that at least some of the pilots believe their compasses are malfunctioning and the worsening weather, which makes assessing their position difficult. The lead pilot makes the decision to fly east, believing they're in the Gulf of Mexico, a course the planes apparently stick to until one pilot's last transmission. All planes close up tight will have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops to 10 gallons, we all go down together. 2 flying boats are dispatched to look for the missing patrol. One of those boats also disappears from radar, and along with its 13-man crew, never returns. A passing merchant spots a fireball in the sky and sees evidence of an oil slick in the water, suggesting it likely falls victim to an explosion. Despite an extensive search by the Navy, bodies and debris from the missing patrol and the missing rescue mission are never located. A team of Navy investigators ultimately attributes the loss of Flight 19 to causes or reasons unknown. Flight 19 is one of the more curious mysteries that remain unsolved. But what happened to the 9 Russian students who were all found murdered in mysterious circumstances while camping? Why did this case become one of history's greatest unsolved adventure mysteries? Let's find out. In late January 1959, a group of 9 students of the Ural Polytechnic Institute and a ski instructor set off for a skiing expedition to Mount Otorten in the northern Urals. Only one of them, Yuri Yudin, who has to turn back early due to health problems, ever returns from the trip. When the other 9 don't make contact as planned, a search party sets out to locate them and uncovers a horrifying mystery. The first thing the rescuers locate is the student's tent, which is sliced open from the inside. Most of the group's belongings are still inside the tent, which appears to be abandoned in a hurry. Investigators find footprints showing that the group has fled the tent barefoot, in socks, or wearing a single shoe. The bodies of 2 of the students, dressed only in their underclothes, are found near the remains of a campfire. 3 more bodies are found between the fire and the tent. All 5 are determined to have died from hypothermia. A couple of months later, the 4 remaining bodies are found at the bottom of a ravine and show signs of crush injuries, and the tongue of one has been ripped out. Tests on their bodies show trace amounts of radiation. The Soviet military looks into the incident, somewhat vaguely determining that the group has died from a natural force they were unable to overcome, and classifying the materials related to the investigation. In early 2019, Russian prosecutors reopened the case for re-examination, though they are only considering theories associated with natural phenomena. The spokesman for Russia's prosecutor general says, "Crime is out of the question. There is not a single proof, even an indirect one, to favor this criminal version. It is either an avalanche, a snow slab, or a hurricane." Numerous theories have been put forward to account for the unexplained deaths, including animal attacks, hypothermia, an avalanche, katabatic winds, infrasound-induced panic, military involvement, or some combination of these factors. But the vague explanations by the Soviet military and its subsequent re-examination only add more intrigue to the case. But wait till you hear about one of the most intriguing cases that has become so popular that it has fueled a movie. On December 7, 1900, Donald MacArthur, Thomas Marshall, and James Ducat begin what was to be a 2-week rotation as keepers of the lighthouse. The superintendent of lighthouses, Robert Muirhead, is the last to see them alive when he performs a routine check. The lighthouse is also monitored by a telescope from the mainland, allowing the men to signal for help if needed. But a heavy mist surrounding the island makes that a problem. The lighthouse is visible on December 7th and 12th, but a passing ship reports that the light was off on the 15th. It's not seen again until the 29th, 8 days after the men should have ended their rotation. It's now December 26, 1900, and a small ship makes its way to a remote Scottish island. It carries a replacement lighthouse keeper who will rotate in for a stint amongst the island's 3 lighthouse keepers and its only human inhabitants. However, when the ship arrives, no one emerges to greet it, even after the horn is sounded and a flare is fired. When the replacement lighthouse keeper rows ashore and climbs to the lighthouse, he quickly discovers something is wrong. The lighthouse fireplace looks like it hasn't been lit for a week, and while everything is in place, the 3 lighthouse keepers are nowhere to be found. Although, oddly, one of them has left his protective oilskin coat in the lighthouse. In 1901, popular rumors about the Lightkeeper's disappearance featured sea monsters. A half-century later, spies and extraterrestrials. Next came blame for human violence fed by madness and every common vice. What is known rests on intact Flannan Isles lighthouse logs and observer notes made during the first days after their disappearance. The lighthouse revealed beds made, a clean kitchen, and completed weather logs. Outside, strong iron equipment was twisted up out of the ground at high points on the island. No bodies were ever found. The official explanation suggests that the men were swept out to sea by a large wave as they attempted to secure some gear on a cliff during a storm. While it is against protocol for all three men to leave the lighthouse at once, one theory suggests that the third lighthouse keeper ventures out to help or warn his colleagues about an impending large wave, perhaps leaving his coat behind in haste, and is also swept away. The disappearance of 3 Scottish lighthouse keepers in 1900 remains a mystery. From the beginning, and as recently as the 2018 movie The Vanishing, evidence of both nature's violence and disturbed human behavior has fed curiosity and creative explanations. Still, mystery hunters are intrigued by details that came not from observers, but from false log entries and a 1912 poem's description of the lighthouse and kitchen in disarray. Well, now I'm curious to watch the film as well. Are you? But wait till you hear about the mystery of MV Joyita and the mysterious circumstances under which the passengers and crew vanished while the ship remained adrift in open waters. Abandoned ship and unsent distress signal. Ships lost at sea are the frequent stuff of history and popular culture. Less common is when ships are found at sea, but the people supposed to be aboard have disappeared. In 1955, the MV Joyita is found empty in the South Pacific. Its radio is tuned to the International Distress Channel, but no SOS signal is received. The MV Joyita had a diverse seafaring portfolio. It started out in 1931 as a luxury yacht for noir film director Roland West, followed by naval use in World War II. It served as a patrol vessel around Hawaii until 1946. The beat-up boat is then refurbished, and it ends as a charter vessel operated by a British sailor. However, its story has a disturbing end in 1955. The Joyita leaves Samoa transporting a crew, a surgeon, a couple of pharmacists, a coconut oil trader, a family with 2 children, a government official, medical supplies, timber and food. Destination: a small island about 4 days away. Unfortunately, the voyage begins badly. The day before, the ship's port engine clutch fails, which delays them a day. Astoundingly, Captain Miller disregards the failed engine and continues with only one other working engine. The voyage to Tokelau Island is supposed to take 48 hours. However, it turns to be much, much longer than that. When the Joyita doesn't make port, the New Zealand Air Force begins a search and rescue mission on October 6th. The planes scour over 260,000 square kilometers of the Pacific to no avail. Several weeks later, in November, Captain Gerald Douglas of the ship Tuvalu finds it adrift and listing heavily at a 45-degree angle over 970 kilometers off her original course near Fiji. The scene is as eerie as it is puzzling. In poor condition, half submerged, with shattered windows and a severely damaged bridge, no one knows what to make of it. Most importantly, its passengers are nowhere to be seen. Along with all 25 people, MV Joyita is missing its log, life rafts, cargo, navigation equipment, and the captain's weapons. A doctor's bag left behind has a few medical instruments and a bunch of bloody bandages. The Joyida's radio is tuned into 2,182 kHz, the International Marine Distress Channel. All clocks are frozen at 10:25. There are other oddities: mattresses propped up against the starboard engine and a makeshift awning covering the top of the deck. Fuel levels indicate the Joyida traveled 391 kilometers before its systems went down. The power was totally cut. Soviet spies, World War II holdout Japanese soldiers, miscommunication, mutiny against an overly confident Captain Miller, and insurance fraud are among the theories floated by news media and historians, with no definitive official conclusion. For now, it looks like Captain Miller is at the epicenter. The puzzle pieces point to general dissatisfaction with his leadership and decisions. Until evidence either washes up on an island or turns up at the bottom of the ocean, we remain at the mercy of speculation. A small island exists in the Gulf of Mexico through centuries of historical documents. Then, by all accounts, it isn't there. What happened to it? It's open to speculation. The earliest document identifying Bermeja is from 1539 Spain. The 80 square kilometer island, about 100 miles off the Yucatan Peninsula, can be seen steadily in maps and government literature since. Bermeja serves as the land point separating U.S. and Mexican economic rights in the Gulf. Then, in 1997, a survey team could not locate the rocky land. Officials report that the island has disappeared. By 2000, the latest nautical boundary rights negotiations do not reference what has been a key point on the map. Isla Bermeja was a controversy because it was a key area of the exclusive economic zone in the Gulf of Mexico. Geographer and island specialist Israel Baxin Martinez explains. There were official searches around this time to see if there was some remnant of this island, because the expansion of this zone for Mexico would mean an abundance of oil. Off the north coast of the Yucatan, it would have been the northernmost Mexican island in the Gulf. As a result of its absence, Mexico lost rights to a maritime area that was believed to hold 22.5 billion barrels of oil. Explanations of the disappeared island feature erosion, climate, and navigational error. Some scientists and historians even conclude that the island didn't even exist. One popular theory says that early sailors misidentified low cloud formations as solid land, and cartographers marked and continued to reference Bermeja on maps for centuries, never taking a closer look due to dangerous sailing conditions. It is even common chatter among fishing communities along the coast of the Yucatan that the island was destroyed deliberately to allow the United States to eat into the exclusive economic zone. With no island, the U.S. gains lucrative oil drilling rights that would have gone to Mexico if the island boundary remained on the map. What do you think about it? Climate change or nefarious plans to get a hold of old black gold reserves? Tell us in the comments below. Over the past century, the Bermuda Triangle has earned a reputation as a wellspring for hair-raising disappearances of ships and planes. Take, for instance, the USS Cyclops, which is en route to Baltimore from Brazil in 1918. It's a carrier ship that boasts 10,800 tons of manganese used to produce weaponry, until its inexplicable disappearance somewhere north of Barbados. The 542-foot ship with 309 crew members and passengers. The last known message from the ship said simply, "Weather fair, all well." But on the 9-day journey, something went awry, and no one from the ship was ever seen or heard again, vanishing without even an SOS. It remains the single greatest loss of life in U.S. naval history not involving combat. In a feature published a couple of years after the ship's disappearance, Santa Fe magazine describes the strangeness of the disappearance. Usually, a wooden bucket or a cork life preserver identified as belonging to a lost ship is picked up after a wreck. But not so with the Cyclops, they report. She just disappeared, as though some gigantic monster of the sea had grabbed her, men and all, and sent her into the depths of the ocean. In what is perhaps the most anticlimactic explanation conceivable, the Naval History and Heritage Command says it probably sank in an unexpected storm. Others say it is the Germans. According to President Woodrow Wilson, only God and the sea know what happens to the great ship. How could the biggest ship in the U.S. Navy vanish without a trace? This was the question on many people's minds. A century on, it's no closer to being answered. Which brings us to the final case in our list, the demise of an entire battalion that fell from the sky after disappearing. Suvla Bay is on the Aegean coast of the Gallipoli Peninsula in eastern Turkey. It's home to hundreds of shipwrecks, with 216 occurring between April 1915 and January 1916 alone. But even more concerning is the bizarre weather phenomenon that results in a mass disappearance. In August 1915, an entire battalion of soldiers vanishes after walking into a strange-looking cloud. Many years later, in April 1965, at the 50th anniversary of the Gallipoli landings, a former New Zealand sapper called Frederick Reichardt issues an extraordinary testimony. Supported by 3 other veterans, Reichardt claims to have witnessed the supernatural disappearance of the 5th Norfolks in August 1915. According to Reichardt, on the afternoon in question, he and his comrades watched a formation of 6 or 8 loaf-shaped clouds hovering over the area where the Norfolks were pressing home their attack. Into one of these low-laying clouds marched the advancing battalion. An hour or so later, the cloud, very unobtrusively, rose and joined the other clouds overhead and sailed off, leaving no trace of the soldiers behind them. Onlookers report seeing a large, silvery cloud slowly engulfing a British colonel, 16 officers, and 250 soldiers in a forest near the coast. Later, 180 bodies are found scattered over 1 square mile near a small farm. A witness says, "It looks like they fell from a great height." There is still no explanation for the deaths or missing men, but UFOs, a portal to a parallel universe, and secret chemical weapons are among the more sensational theories. Others include a silent, unseen battle between Turkish and British soldiers, or the soldiers mistakenly attacking their own. And since you've stuck around so kindly with us, we'll indulge you with a bonus case. Now, imagine if you wake up one day and find that your entire village has gone missing. No, I'm not talking about a scene from a horror sci-fi movie, but it's a real-life mystery of the disappearance of the village Verde. In February 1923, the 600 residents of the small Brazilian village of Verde simply vanish overnight, leaving their possessions and food behind. A small group of visitors make the unsettling discovery as they venture into the town. As they walk deeper into the small community, it becomes apparent that no one is there. All around is a chilling silence. No birds are singing, no insects buzzing, nothing. The visitors inform the local police, who investigate further. Again, they find no sign of anyone and no clues as to where the residents might have gone. Upon entering the village school, the police see this message on a blackboard: "There is no salvation." A gun discovered nearby has been fired within the previous 24 hours. Several theories about the fate of the villagers revolve around paranormal or alien activity. Other people point to the changing political landscape of Brazil at the time and speculate that the residents decided to leave the area rather than getting caught in the crossfire of guerrilla warfare. As plausible as that theory may be on the surface, it doesn't explain why they leave so suddenly, without taking their clothing and food supplies. Furthermore, there are no records of the villagers emerging in other Brazilian communities, which surely would be the case if they had simply changed locations. And that's it for today. Thank you for sticking along till the end. If you liked the video, don't forget to show it some love by liking and sharing. Tell us which case intrigued you the most in the comments below. Until next time, take care.